You want to know what a $175 million defense system sounds like when it dies? Dead silence. Complete digital blackout. I was sitting in my Chevy Silverado outside Rocky's Defense Solutions at 12:45 p.m. on a Wednesday in March, watching my laptop screen as Iron Shield locked itself down in front of a room full of Department of Homeland Security officials. The countdown had hit 0 15 minutes earlier. The screens went black and Charles Brookfield's career imploded in real time. The best part? He had no idea I was watching from the King Soopers parking lot 4 blocks away on South Colorado Boulevard, or that I'd triggered the whole meltdown from my truck. But let me back up to 9:15 a.m. when Charles fired me for refusing to train his Instagram influencer niece how to handle national security. That's when this whole thing started. My name's Michael Harrison, but everyone calls me Mac. 48 years old, divorced dad, 18 years in Navy intelligence before I got into cybersecurity here in Denver. I'd been senior systems architect at Rocky's Defense Solutions for 6 years. And Iron Shield wasn't just my job, it was my life's work. The most advanced cybersecurity platform the Department of Homeland Security had ever commissioned, protecting everything from power grids to water treatment plants to military installations across the western states, keeping Chinese hackers and Russian cyber terrorists from shutting down everything that keeps American families safe and secure. You don't just stumble into this kind of work. After 9/11, when I was still stationed at Norfolk, everything changed. I watched our country realize we weren't just fighting enemies with guns and bombs anymore. The real war was happening in cyberspace, and we were losing badly. That's what drove me from traditional intelligence into cyber warfare. Spent my last 8 years in the Navy, learning how to protect American infrastructure from digital attacks that could kill just as many people as any missile. When I finally mustered out in 2018, Denver made sense. Close to Peterson Air Force Base, Cheyenne Mountain, NORAD. A hub for defense contractors who understood that the next Pearl Harbor would happen through fiber optic cables, not aircraft carriers. Rocky's Defense Solutions recruited me specifically to build something the government desperately needed. A system that could protect civilian infrastructure with the same intensity we protected military assets overseas. That Wednesday morning started normal enough. I grabbed my usual coffee from that little shop on Colfax, sat through the typical I-25 nightmare traffic, and walked into Charles's corner office thinking we were going to discuss the DHS contract expansion. The meeting was supposed to be about adding new threat detection protocols for the next phase rollout, maybe integrating with Peterson Air Force Base's systems down in Colorado Springs. My son Jake had texted me earlier that morning. "Dad, got my Naval Academy interview next week, wish me luck." That kid, 17 years old, straight A student, varsity football player, and determined to serve his country just like his old man. Everything I was doing at Rocky's was building toward a future where Jake could serve in a military that actually knew how to protect America in the digital age. Instead of discussing contract expansions, I found Charles pacing behind his massive glass desk like a caged animal, sweating through his expensive suit despite the building's air conditioning running full blast. You could practically smell the desperation coming off him. "Max, sit down. No coffee offer this time. No small talk about the Broncos or the latest snowfall in the mountains." That should have been my first warning. "We need to discuss operational efficiency," he said, using that corporate speak that always meant someone was about to get screwed over. I'd heard variations of that phrase before during my Navy days when some Pentagon desk jockey wanted to replace experienced intelligence officers with cheaper contractors who couldn't tell the difference between a submarine and a shipping container. "I've brought in a consultant," Charles continued, his voice carrying that fake enthusiasm executives use when they're about to announce something completely idiotic. "Someone who understands the digital marketplace, the new economy, the social media generation." That's when she walked in. Madison Brookfield, Charles's 23-year-old niece, dressed like she was heading to some Boulder coffee shop instead of a defense contractor's office. I knew her from Instagram. My son Jake had shown me her posts during one of our Sunday dinners, rolling his eyes at the kind of content his generation had to deal with. 150,000 followers watching her review skincare products and crypto investments while posing in front of her uncle's BMW in the company parking garage. "Uncle Charles says you're going to show me the ropes," Madison chirped, already pulling out her iPhone to record. "This is so amazing. I'm thinking we could do a whole series about behind the scenes at a defense company. My followers would totally love authentic content like this. Maybe we could even do some filters with the security screens." I looked at Charles, hoping this was some kind of elaborate joke. You want me to train her on Iron Shield? Madison has fresh perspectives, Mac. She graduated summa cum laude in communications from CU Boulder. The board thinks new blood is exactly what we need to modernize our approach and connect with younger demographics. New blood. Right. What they needed was someone who understood that Iron Shield wasn't some social media app you could figure out over a weekend of energy drinks and YouTube tutorials. This was 12 layers of military-grade encryption protecting the backbone of Western American infrastructure. The system that kept the lights on in Denver hospitals during blizzards, that protected water treatment plants from cyber terrorists who wanted to poison entire cities. That made sure Russian hackers couldn't shut down the power grid during a Colorado winter and leave families freezing in the dark. But Charles had dollar signs dancing in his eyes and a board of directors breathing down his neck about cost reduction and market expansion. Rocky's stock had been flat for 18 months and the shareholders were getting restless. They wanted results, and they wanted them now, regardless of what it might cost in terms of actual security. Word was already circulating that Chinese investment firms were sniffing around, offering big money for American defense technology. The kind of money that made executives forget about little things like national security and protecting the country that gave them the freedom to get rich in the first place. I'm completely swamped with the DHS security review, I said, keeping my voice level and professional. Maybe someone from the training department could help her get oriented with basic protocols first. Charles's face went hard, that executive mask slipping to reveal the desperate man underneath. This isn't a request, Mac. It's a direct order from the board. I'd been in the Navy long enough to recognize when someone was giving you an order they knew was wrong. The kind of order that gets good sailors killed because some officer cared more about politics and career advancement than protecting the people under his command. I can't do that, Charles. The words hung in the air like smoke from a misfired round. 18 years of military service had taught me when to follow orders and when to stand your ground. This was definitely a stand your ground moment. Can't or won't. His voice dropped to that dangerous quiet that officers use right before they destroy your career. Won't, I said without hesitation. Iron Shield protects critical infrastructure. Power plants, hospitals, military communications networks. It's not a training exercise for social media consultants who think cybersecurity is just another content opportunity. I thought about Jake, probably sitting in his AP physics class right now dreaming about serving his country. About my ex-wife Sarah, whose lupus treatments were only possible because hospitals had reliable power and secure networks. About every American family who trusted people like me to keep the lights on and the water clean. Charles's hand moved toward his desk phone like he was drawing a weapon. Send security up here now. Madison was still recording, completely oblivious to the fact that she was documenting the end of my career at Rocky's Defense Solutions. To her, this was just another day of creating content for her followers. Michael Harrison, Charles said, his voice cold as a January morning in the Rockies. Your refusal to follow direct orders and adapt to our evolving business model shows you're no longer aligned with company objectives. You're terminated, effective immediately. Security escort, 15 minutes to pack my personal belongings. The whole corporate termination, routine that I'd seen happen to other people but never thought would happen to me. But here's what Charles didn't know. What none of them knew. I'd been planning for this exact scenario since the day I started building Iron Shield. See, when Sarah got lupus 4 years back, the medical bills nearly wiped us out. Even with insurance, the treatments, the specialists, the experimental drugs that weren't covered. It was a financial disaster that taught me never to put all my eggs in one corporate basket again. That's when I set up Harrison Defense Innovations LLC with my brother Tommy, a retired JAG officer who'd spent 20 years handling military contracts and knew every legal loophole in the federal acquisition regulations. Every patent, every piece of core architecture, every critical component that made Iron Shield actually work was filed under that LLC, not Rocky's. Perfectly legal, perfectly planned, and about to become Charles Brookfield's worst nightmare. 2 security guards walked me down to my office. Professional guys, both veterans who'd served overseas, and knew this whole situation stunk worse than a porta potty at a county fair after 3 days of heat and beer. In the elevator down to the 12th floor, I filled them in on what was really happening. They're selling us out, boys, I said quietly, making sure the elevator cameras couldn't pick up my words. Charles has meetings scheduled with Chinese investors next week. wants to license Iron Shield technology to whoever writes the biggest check. One of the guards, a former Marine who'd done 2 tours in Iraq, just shook his head and muttered something under his breath about corporate traitors. The other guy, Navy like me, asked if there was anything they could do to help. "Just give me my full 15 minutes in the office," I said. "And maybe take your time walking me to the parking garage." My office looked exactly the same as it had 3 hours earlier when I'd been a respected senior architect instead of an escorted security risk. Pictures of Jake at his football games lined my desk. Him scoring the winning touchdown at the regional championship last fall, getting his academic achievement award. Both of us at a Broncos game last season, grinning like idiots after watching them demolish the Raiders. There was a photo from his Eagle Scout ceremony last year, where he'd chosen to do his project helping disabled veterans learn computer skills. There was my old unit photo from Afghanistan, back when we were still figuring out how to fight a war that happened as much in cyberspace as on the ground. The original Iron Shield development team working 16-hour days in that converted warehouse we'd rented off Federal Boulevard. And my coffee mug that Jake had given me for Father's Day. World's okayest dad. 15 minutes to pack up 6 years of my professional life. I grabbed the personal stuff first. Photos, the mug, that small American flag Jake had made me in middle school shop class. But what I really needed was already in my jacket pocket. A USB drive that looked like any other storage device but contained something Charles had never bothered to investigate. That drive held the original patent filings, the licensing agreements, and most importantly, the administrative keys to Iron Shield's deepest security protocols. Level 12, I called it. My insurance policy that I'd hoped I'd never have to use. "Don't take any company property," Madison announced from my doorway, still recording with her phone like this was all some reality show episode. "Uncle Charles said you people always try to steal stuff when you get fired. You people?" Like I was some kind of criminal instead of the guy who'd spent 6 years keeping her comfortable lifestyle safe from the people who wanted to destroy everything she took for granted. "Everything I need is right here," I said, patting my jacket pocket where the USB drive sat next to my truck keys. The walk to the elevator felt like a funeral march. Other engineers and support staff watched from their cubicles, some giving me sympathetic looks, others just keeping their heads down to avoid getting caught up in whatever corporate drama was playing out. Kelly Martinez, my lead developer, caught my eye and gave me a subtle thumbs up. She knew what was coming. As the elevator doors closed, I pulled out my phone and sent a quick text to my core team. "Storm incoming. Watch the 12:30 p.m. demo real careful." Kelly texted back immediately. "What did you do, Mac?" "Nothing yet. But they're about to find out what happens when you mess with American defense infrastructure." My Silverado had never felt more like a mobile command center. I fired up my laptop right there in the Rockies parking garage, connecting through my phone's hotspot instead of the company network. Within minutes, I was logged into Iron Shield's administrative interface through the back channels I'd built into the system from day one. The screen came to life with a simple message. "Welcome, System Architect. All systems operational. Security level 12 armed and ready. Level 12. While Charles and his board had been celebrating each new government contract I delivered, I'd been quietly building something they didn't even know existed. A dead man's switch wired directly into Iron Shield's heart, designed to protect the system from exactly this kind of corporate incompetence. The logic was elegant in its simplicity. If the primary system architect's employment status changed to terminated without proper security clearance transfer protocols, Iron Shield would automatically lock down everything. No access, no demonstrations, no $175 million contracts until the ownership dispute got resolved through proper legal channels. I checked my watch. 9:47 a.m. Charles's big DHS demonstration was scheduled for 12:30 p.m. sharp. He'd have a conference room full of officials and defense contractors watching him show off technology he thought belonged to him. Time to teach him the difference between licensing something and owning it. I activated the protocol with a single keystroke. Iron Shield began its countdown. 2 hours, 43 minutes, 0 seconds, and ticking down steadily toward Charles's destruction. 163 minutes until Charles's world came apart at the seams. I sat in my truck watching the countdown tick down on my laptop screen while Denver traffic crawled by on Colorado Boulevard. My phone buzzed with a text from Jake between his classes at Cherry Creek High. Dad, saw some weird stuff trending on Twitter about your company. Everything cool? I smiled as I typed back. Everything's better than cool, son. Your old man just reminded some people why they shouldn't mess with guys who actually know how to build things. Awesome. Can't wait to hear the story. Gotta get to AP Physics. Love you. Love you too, kiddo. That boy. 17 years old, straight A student, varsity football player, Eagle Scout, and determined to serve his country just like his old man. He was applying to the Naval Academy next week, wanting to follow in the old man's footsteps. I was doing this as much for his future as anything else. Jake deserved to grow up in a country where critical infrastructure was protected by competent professionals, not handed over to social media influencers for content creation. I drove downtown to Tommy's law office on 17th Street, past the food trucks and the Denver Art Museum that made this city what it was. Tommy had handled the Harrison Defense Innovations LLC paperwork years ago, and he'd been waiting for this phone call ever since. "Mac," he said, as his secretary showed me into his corner office overlooking the mountains. "I heard about your employment status change. Ready to discuss your options?" Through his floor-to-ceiling windows, I could see the Rockies building 8 blocks away. Up on the 20th floor, Charles was probably making final preparations for his demo, completely unaware that in exactly 1 hour and 51 minutes, his $175 million defense contract was going to explode like an IED in downtown Baghdad. "Let's talk about what happens when that countdown hits 0, I said. Tommy pulled out a thick folder labeled Harrison Defense Innovations Contingency Plans. We'd been preparing for this day for years, running through different scenarios, making sure every legal angle was covered. My brother had learned from 20 years of JAG work that the Pentagon could make or break defense contractors overnight, and the smart money always had an exit strategy. "Iron Shield patent filings are rock solid, Mac," Tommy said, spreading documents across his conference table. "Every core innovation traces back to your LLC. Rockies has been licensing technology they never actually owned. They had full usage rights as long as certain employment conditions were maintained, conditions that were violated at 9:15 this morning. Exactly. And Mac, I've got some interesting news. I've been in contact with Patricia Stone at Stone Strategic Partners. They've been watching Rockies for months, specifically interested in Iron Shield technology. When news of today's events gets out, they're going to want to talk." At exactly 12:30 p.m., the Rockies conference room had been transformed into what looked like a military command center. I knew this because Kelly Martinez was texting me real-time updates from inside the building. 3 massive screens displayed Iron Shield's interface in high-definition glory, while the company's remaining engineers stood ready at support stations like they were launching a space shuttle instead of demonstrating cybersecurity software. The DHS evaluation team sat around the polished conference table. 4 officials, 6 defense contractors, and enough combined authority to control more cybersecurity funding than most small countries. Charles stood at the head of the table, confident as a poker player holding what he thought were 4 aces. Madison sat beside him with her iPhone, live streaming the whole thing to her Instagram followers with captions like, "Taking Uncle's company to the next level, #DefenseTech, #Entrepreneur, #Disruptor. "Ladies and gentlemen," Charles began, his practiced presentation voice echoing off the conference room walls, "what you're about to see isn't just cybersecurity software. It's the future of American defense infrastructure, streamlined for the global marketplace and ready for the digital native generation." He nodded to the demonstration engineer, some kid fresh out of Colorado State who'd been hired to replace Brad Wilson after I'd recommended Brad for a raise 8 months ago. The kid had talent, but nowhere near the experience needed to handle a system this complex. The CSU graduate started typing commands, and the screens flickered to life with Iron Shield's initialization sequence. Everything looked perfect for exactly 12 seconds. The graphics were sharp, the response time was instant, the interface was clean and professional. Then the first error message appeared. "System architect authentication required." The kid frowned, typing faster. "Just a minor authentication glitch, sir. Let me reset the connection. Access denied. Employment verification failed. What's the problem?" Charles's voice carried that edge that officers get when their carefully planned battle strategy starts falling apart in real time. "I'm not sure, sir. The system is requesting architect-level credentials that don't seem to exist in our current database." That's when my countdown hit 0. The screens flashed red 3 times, then displayed a message that made Charles's face go white as fresh Colorado snow. "Security lockdown initiated. Iron Shield system in protective mode. All access revoked. Time remaining, 0 hours, 0 minutes, 0 seconds. Contact system administrator for resolution. The DHS team exchanged those looks that senior government officials perfect over decades of dealing with contractors who overpromise and underdeliver. Director Patricia Hayes, who'd been evaluating defense systems since before Charles got out of business school, leaned forward with the expression of someone who just watched a billion-dollar missile miss its target by 3 time zones. "Mr. Brookfield," she said in that steel-trap voice that had probably terrified junior officials for the past 20 years, "is there a problem with your system?" The room fell silent except for the humming of the air conditioning and Madison's whispered commentary to her Instagram audience about technical difficulties and digital disruption in action. Charles was about to learn what real disruption looked like. "No problem at all, Director Hayes," Charles said, his voice cracking like a teenager's. "Just a routine security protocol that'll be resolved momentarily." He turned to Brad Wilson, the guy they'd promoted to CTO about 30 seconds after my security escort ended. "Fix this now." Brad's fingers flew across his keyboard, sweat beading on his forehead like he was trying to defuse an actual bomb. "Sir, I can't access the core systems. There's something here about security level 12, but I've never seen that protocol before." "Level 12? What the hell is level 12? Nobody in that room knew the answer, which was exactly the point. I'd built level 12 so deep into Iron Shield's architecture that finding it would be like looking for a specific grain of sand on the beaches of California. "Get Michael Harrison on the phone," Charles barked at his assistant, desperation starting to show through his corporate facade. "Sir, he was terminated this morning per your direct orders." "I don't care if he was terminated. Get him on the line now." The call went straight to my voicemail, the professional recording I'd set up specifically for this moment. "You've reached Michael Harrison. I'm currently unavailable, but if this is regarding Iron Shield system architecture, please consult your existing licensing agreements and employment contracts. Thanks for calling and have a great day." Director Hayes stood up slowly, gathering her materials with the deliberate movements of someone who just wasted 4 hours of her valuable time. The other DHS officials followed her lead, their faces showing the kind of disappointment usually reserved for contractors who promised stealth technology and delivered paper airplanes. "Mr. Brookfield, it appears you have significant internal issues that need resolution. We'll need to postpone this demonstration indefinitely." "Wait, please, Director. This is just a minor technical issue we can resolve in minutes." "Minor?" The director's voice could have frozen the South Platte River in July. "Your core defense system is completely inaccessible during a $175 million contract evaluation. Your marketing representative is live streaming our classified discussion to social media. And apparently the only person who can fix this crisis is someone you fired 3 hours ago." She headed for the door, her team following like a well-disciplined unit retreating from a compromised position. "We'll be in touch." Maybe. The DHS team filed out in crisp formation, leaving behind a conference room that felt like a tomb. Madison was still recording, finally starting to understand that her uncle's company was imploding in real time, and her Instagram followers were witnessing the greatest corporate failure in defense industry history. When the screens finally went completely dark, a single message appeared in bold white letters. "Iron Shield system in protective mode. All access revoked. For licensing inquiries, please contact Harrison Defense Innovations, LLC. Authorized representative, Thomas Harrison, JAG, retired." In the span of 3 hours, Charles Brookfield had lost everything. The DHS contract was dead. Rocky's stock price was in freefall as news of the failed demonstrations spread through defense industry circles. And Iron Shield, the crown jewel technology that justified the company's entire valuation, was locked behind digital walls that only I controlled. My phone lit up like 4th of July fireworks over downtown Denver with missed calls from Rocky's legal team. Tommy texted me from his office. 47 attempts to reach you in the past hour. Should I return their calls? Let them sweat until tomorrow, I texted back. I'm picking up Jake from school. That evening, I sat across from my son at our usual diner on South Broadway, watching him process everything I'd just told him. Jake had always been mature for his age, but this was different. This was his old man explaining how sometimes you have to choose between doing what's easy and doing what's right. "So you basically nuked your own company to protect national security?" he asked, grinning like he'd just watched his favorite action movie come to life. I protected technology that keeps Americans safe, son. There's a difference between a company and the mission. And now what happens? Now we build something better. Tommy's already been contacted by Patricia Stone at Stone Strategic Partners. They want to back a new company, Harrison Defense Systems, properly run by people who understand that some things are more important than quarterly profits. 3 days later, I found myself in the executive offices of Stone Strategic Partners downtown, sitting across from Patricia Stone in a conference room that overlooked the Denver skyline. Patricia was the kind of woman who'd been making smart investments in American defense technology for 25 years, and she had the track record to prove it. "Harrison," she said, studying me over her coffee cup. "Director Hayes called me personally after the Rockies demonstration. In 20 years of defense contracting, she said she's never witnessed such a spectacular system failure that was actually a spectacular success." "How do you mean?" "You proved that Iron Shield works exactly as designed. It protected itself from unauthorized access, even from the company that thought they owned it. That's the kind of system the government actually wants to buy." We spent the next week working through details. By the following Friday, the framework was complete. Harrison Defense Systems would be incorporated with $180 million in backing. The patents would transfer smoothly from my brother's legal structure, and Charles Brookfield had already been fired by his own board of directors. 2 weeks later, Jake got his acceptance letter to the Naval Academy. That night, over celebratory steaks at his favorite restaurant, he raised his Coke and said, "To the old man who taught me that integrity isn't just about following orders, it's about knowing when not to. They fired me at 9:15 a.m. for refusing to compromise American security. 3 weeks later, I owned the very technology their entire company was built on, had a better funded company, and my son was headed to Annapolis. And that, as Jake would say, was pretty awesome."